I was sitting on my own front porch when my daughter-in-law opened the door just wide enough to look at me like I was a stranger, selling something she didn't want. Not a guest, not family, something to be dismissed. I had driven 40 minutes from my house in Knoxville to bring my grandson a birthday cake. Chocolate, his favorite, with the little fondant dinosaurs I had spent the better part of a Tuesday afternoon making. I had the box balanced in both hands. My purse was sliding off my shoulder, and she looked at the cake, then at me, and said, "We already have plans today. You should have called first." I had called. 3 times that morning. Nobody answered. I stood there on that porch for a moment longer than I should have. Long enough to feel the heat come up into my face. Long enough to hear my grandson's voice somewhere inside the house, laughing at something on television, not knowing I was 12 feet away holding a cake with his name on it. I said, "Tell him his grandmother stopped by." She closed the door before I got back to my car. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes. I didn't cry. I was past crying by then. I just sat there with the cake on my passenger seat and thought about the payment I had made 4 days earlier, the automatic transfer that went out every first of the month, quiet as a heartbeat, into my son's account. It had been going out like that for 4 years and 3 months. 51 payments. Every single one on time. I thought about that number the whole drive home. My name is Carol. I am 67 years old. I taught 3rd grade in Knox County for 31 years, and I retired with a pension that was enough to live comfortably, not lavishly, but comfortably if I was careful. I owned my house outright. I drove a 7-year-old Subaru that I kept in good shape. I didn't take expensive vacations or buy things I didn't need. What I did do, for 4 years and 3 months, was help my son and his wife stay afloat financially while they told me, in 100 different ways, that I was not welcome in their life. My son's name is Derek. He is 39 years old. He works in sales for a medical device company and has, by any reasonable measure, a good income. His wife's name is Renee. She is 36. She worked in marketing until she decided, about 2 years into their marriage, that she didn't want to work anymore. That was her choice to make. I won't pretend otherwise. But here is what that choice meant in practice. Derek called me about 4.5 years ago, not long after Renee stopped working. They were behind on their mortgage by 2 months. The baby had just turned 1. Derek's voice on the phone was tight and embarrassed, and I heard something in it that took me back 30 years to when he was a little boy and had broken a neighbor's window and didn't know how to tell me. That same caught quality. That same hope that I would fix it without making him feel too bad. I transferred 2 months of mortgage payments that same afternoon, $4,200. I told myself it was a one-time thing. Within 6 months, it was not a one-time thing. What started as a mortgage backup became something else, so gradually that I didn't notice the shape of it until I was already deep inside it. There was the car payment, when Renee decided she wanted something newer and safer for the baby. There was the credit card balance that needed clearing before the interest got out of control. There was the gym membership, the streaming services, the grocery top-ups when they had a big month. There was the family vacation to Florida that they couldn't quite swing on their own. There was Renee's online course, $300 a month for 8 months, for a certification she never finished. I want to be clear about something. I am not a woman who gives money and then holds it over people. I did not bring up these payments at holidays or use them to insert myself into decisions that weren't mine to make. I transferred the money, and I said nothing. I thought that was what love looked like. I thought I was being generous in the truest sense, the kind that doesn't keep score. What I did not understand yet was that when you never say anything, some people stop believing there is anything to say. By the 2nd year, Renee had stopped thanking me for the transfers. Not stopped meaning it stopped doing it entirely. Derek would sometimes send a text. "Got it, thanks, Mom." More often he didn't. I told myself they were busy. I told myself gratitude didn't have to look like a formal acknowledgement every time. I had a friend, Paulette, who used to meet me for coffee on Thursday mornings at a place on Market Square. She had known me for over 20 years. One Thursday, she put her mug down and looked at me with the direct, undecorated expression that only old friends are allowed to use, and she said, "Carol, they are not busy. They are comfortable." I told her she didn't understand the situation. She said, "You're right. I don't understand why you keep paying for a life they're living without you in it." I drove home from that coffee feeling irritated with Paulette. I transferred the rent supplement that afternoon. The birthday party for my grandson, his name is Owen, he was turning 5, that happened 2 weeks after the cake incident. I was not invited to the party. I found out about it through a photo that Derek posted, a backyard full of streamers, and a bounce house, and other children running around in the Tennessee heat. Owen was laughing in the center of the frame, wearing a shirt that said "Birthday Boy" in big letters. I looked at that photo for a long time. I had been sending money every month. I had been told implicitly and sometimes explicitly that I was an intrusion. I had been called uninvited on my own grandson's birthday, while a bounce house, which is not a cheap thing to rent, appeared in the background of a photo I was not in. I did not call Derek that night. I thought about it. I held the phone in my hand, sitting at my kitchen table with the television off, and the window cracked, and the sounds of my neighbor's wind chimes coming through from the yard next door. And then I put the phone down and I went to bed. Something had shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but I felt it, the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds actually arrive. Something in me had quietly stopped. I began for the first time to keep records. I am not a naturally suspicious person. I don't look for problems, and I don't enjoy conflict. But I had a feeling, sitting with me like a stone at the bottom of my chest, that I needed to understand what I had actually been doing for 4 years. So I pulled up my bank statements. I went back to the beginning. I made a spreadsheet. I am a retired school teacher. I know how to organize information. It took me a full evening to go through everything. When I was done, I sat back in my chair and I looked at the total. 4 years and 3 months of transfers. Mortgage support, car payments, grocery supplements, the Florida trip, the course fees, the miscellaneous small amounts that I had never thought to add up. A bounce house, I now realized, would have been the least of it. The number on the screen was not a number I had ever said out loud. I had been aware of each payment individually. I had not been aware of them as a sum. Looking at them as a sum was a different experience entirely. I thought about my retirement account. I thought about the years I had spent getting up at 6:30 every morning to teach other people's children to read. I thought about the winters I had kept the heat at 68 instead of 72. Small savings, small disciplines, the 1,000 tiny choices that add up to a life. And I thought about Owen, somewhere across town, jumping in a bounce house at a party I was not invited to. I closed the spreadsheet. I did not do anything else that night. What I did over the following 2 weeks was watch. I watched Derek's social media. Renee had a public account, which I suspect she did not realize I followed. There were photos from a weekend trip they took to Nashville. There was a post about a new couch they had bought, the kind with deep cushions and built-in USB ports that runs upward of $2,000. There was a birthday dinner that Renee posted for herself, a restaurant downtown with a tasting menu. I remembered that month. The first of that month, I had transferred money to cover a shortfall they'd mentioned for their HOA fees. I am not telling you this so you will be angry on my behalf. I was angry enough for both of us. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what I did next was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It was the most deliberate decision I had made in years. I called my bank. I canceled the automatic transfer. That was it. No phone call to Derek, no email, no letter. No conversation sitting across a kitchen table. No ultimatum, no threat, no announcement. The transfer that had gone out quietly, on the first of every month for 4 years and 3 months, simply did not go out. I want to tell you what that felt like. It felt like putting down something very heavy that I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten it wasn't part of my body. My shoulders actually dropped when I hung up the phone. I sat for a minute and breathed and looked around my kitchen, my own kitchen, in my own house, with the blue curtains I had picked out myself, and the percolator I had owned since before Derek was born. And for the first time, in a long time, I felt like the room belonged to me entirely. 3 days passed, then 4, then 6. On the 8th day, Derek called. I let it ring. I am not proud of that, but I am not ashamed of it either. I watched his name on the screen until it stopped flashing, and then I sat with the silence that followed. He called again 2 hours later. I answered, "Mom." His voice had a quality I had not heard in a while. Tight, unsettled. "Did something happen with the transfer?" I said, "Yes." There was a pause. He said, "What happened?" I said I canceled it. Another pause. Longer this time. "What do you mean you canceled it?" I said, "I mean I called the bank and I canceled the automatic transfer. It won't be going out anymore." I heard him exhale. I heard, in the background, Renee's voice saying something I couldn't make out. Then Derek said, "Mom, we kind of count on that. You know that." I said, "I know. We have the mortgage. We have the car note. We've built this is something we've been depending on." I said, "I understand. So can you explain what's going on? Because this feels very out of nowhere." I thought about the porch. I thought about the cake with the fondant dinosaurs that sat in my refrigerator for 4 days before I brought it to work and left it in the teacher's lounge. I thought about Owen's face in the birthday photo, laughing, unaware. I said, "I've been making that transfer for 4 years and 3 months, Derek. 51 payments. And I've been trying to think of the last time I was at your house for a dinner or a holiday or just a regular Sunday. I've been trying to think of the last time Owen spent a weekend with me. I've been trying to remember the last time Renee said thank you." He was quiet. I said, "I'm not angry. I'm not trying to start a fight. I just finally did the math, and it didn't add up to anything I recognized as a relationship. So I stopped. Mom, you can't just—" "I can," I said. "It's my money. I gave it to you freely for 4 years. But it's still my money, and I'm keeping it now." He said some other things after that. He was not cruel, to his credit. He was flustered and defensive, and he said things like, "You don't understand the financial pressure we're under, and Renee didn't mean to make you feel that way, and we've just been so busy." I let him talk. I didn't argue with any of it. When he ran out of things to say, I told him I loved him, and I hoped we could find a way forward together, and then I said goodbye and I hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that. I want to tell you what happened over the following months, because I think it matters. The first thing that happened was that Derek called back 3 more times in the following 2 weeks. The calls had a progression to them. The first was still defensive. The second was quieter, something more searching in his voice, like a man feeling around in the dark for a wall he knows is there. The third was different. He called on a Sunday morning and he said, "Can I come over?" He came alone. Renee did not come. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had looked at my spreadsheet, where I had canceled the transfer, where I had held the phone and let his first call ring out, and he was quiet for a minute before he spoke. He looked, I thought, like a man who had done some math of his own. He said, "I looked at our accounts after you and I talked. Really looked at them." He stopped. "Mom, I didn't realize how much of what we were spending was because we knew you were covering the rest. I didn't let myself realize it. I didn't say anything." He said, "The trip to Nashville. The couch. I kept telling myself we could afford it because the baseline was covered. And the baseline was you." I reached across the table, and I put my hand over his. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything about Renee. I didn't bring up the porch, or the birthday cake, or Owen's party. Those things were real, and they had happened, and they had mattered, but they were not what that conversation needed to be about. I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm your mother. But I need you to know that my being your mother doesn't mean I don't exist when you're not in front of me. He looked up. I said, I'd like to see Owen. Derek brought Owen to my house the following Saturday. My daughter-in-law did not come, and I did not expect her to. Owen arrived at my door with his Spider-Man backpack and his missing front tooth, and he looked at my living room with the frank, assessing gaze of a 5-year-old and said, Do you have snacks? I had snacks. We spent that Saturday making cookies and watching 2 movies, and doing a jigsaw puzzle that was technically rated for ages 8 and up, but which Owen approached with extraordinary commitment. He fell asleep on my couch around 6 o'clock with his head on a throw pillow and his sneakers still on, and I sat in the armchair across from him in the evening light and felt something loosen in my chest that had been wound tight for a very long time. I want to be honest with you about Renee, because I think you deserve the full picture and not just the easy version. Renee and I have not repaired things. I do not know if we will. She has not apologized, and I have not waited for one. What I have done is let go of the part of me that needed her to understand what she had done, because I've come to believe that waiting for that understanding would have kept me in a posture of injury indefinitely, and I am done being injured. Derek and Renee are managing their finances without my support. I don't know the details and I haven't asked. I know they canceled a subscription service or 2. I know they didn't take a vacation this year. I don't feel good about their difficulty. I want to be clear about that. I am not sitting in my house enjoying watching anyone struggle. What I am doing is living my own life again. I have had coffee with Paulette every Thursday since the spring, and a few months ago I told her what I had done. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the great gifts she has ever given me, and then she said, How do you feel? I said, Like myself. She picked up her mug and said, Good. Now tell me about Owen. I told her about the jigsaw puzzle, and the Spider-Man backpack, and the snacks. I told her about the Saturday afternoons that had become a small, steady rhythm. Owen and I, cookies and puzzles and movies, and the simple, unmistakable fact of being wanted, not for what I could provide. Just for being me. Just for being his grandmother. That is worth more than 51 payments. It is worth more than any number I could put in a spreadsheet. My son still has work to do. I know that. His marriage has trouble in it that I cannot see clearly from the outside, and that is not mine to fix. What I have is the version of him that sits across my kitchen table sometimes, the one who is learning, slowly and imperfectly, to live without a net he shouldn't have had in the first place. And I have Owen on Saturdays. If you are someone who has been giving and giving to people who have stopped seeing you, I want to tell you something, not as advice but as witness. There is a moment when the giving stops being love and starts being something else. Something that costs you without building anything. And the hardest part is that you can't always feel the difference from the inside, because love and habit can look identical when you're not paying attention. What I know now is that the most loving thing I ever did for my son was stop. I walked away from that porch, from that closed door, and I went home and I did the math, and I made one phone call, and I set down a weight that I had mistaken for devotion. I am 67 years old. I have blue curtains in my kitchen that I picked out myself. I have a 7-year-old Subaru in good shape. I have a grandson who asks me if I have snacks and then falls asleep on my couch with his sneakers on. I have enough. I have exactly enough.